The rain hammered the concrete steps of the Blackwood mansion as Maya clutched her swollen belly, her 3 rescue dogs huddled around her legs. The ornate front door had just slammed shut, sealing her fate with the cold finality of a coffin lid. "Don't ever come back here, you worthless gold digger," Victoria Blackwood had sneered through the crack before shutting Maya out forever. After her husband died in the accident, his family wasted no time showing their true colors. To them, she was nothing, a poor nobody who had somehow tricked their precious son into marriage. But hidden in Maya's worn backpack was a letter that would change everything. A letter from Whitmore and Associates, the most exclusive law firm in the city. A letter about her real grandfather, the one her mother never spoke of. The grandfather who had spent 30 years searching for his lost bloodline before his death last month. Maya had no idea she was about to become one of the richest women in America. The Blackwoods had no idea their cruelty was about to cost them everything they held dear. What happens when the family who cast her out discovers Maya now controls their entire fortune? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Thunder cracked overhead as Maya struggled to her feet, her 7-month belly making every movement awkward. A golden retriever, Rusty, pressed against her side while the 2 smaller mutts, Patches and Bean, whimpered at her feet. All 3 animals had been rescued from kill shelters, just like Maya had once rescued herself from the streets. "It's okay, babies," she whispered, stroking Rusty's rain-soaked fur. "We'll figure this out." But even as she said the words, Maya felt the familiar sting of abandonment. It was the same feeling she'd carried since childhood, when her mother would disappear for days, leaving 12-year-old Maya to fend for herself. The same feeling that had driven her to marry David Blackwood after knowing him only 3 months, desperate for the family and security she'd never had. David had been different from his family, kind, gentle. He'd found her working double shifts at a downtown diner and somehow saw past her thrift store clothes and calloused hands. For 18 beautiful months, Maya had believed in fairy tales. Then came the car accident, a drunk driver running a red light, and suddenly Maya's prince was gone, leaving her pregnant and alone with people who'd never wanted her in the first place. The Blackwood family had tolerated her while David was alive, their distaste barely concealed behind forced smiles at dinner parties. But the moment the funeral ended, the gloves came off. Victoria had given Maya exactly 1 week to collect her things and get out of their lives forever. Maya had hoped they'd soften when they learned about the baby, their son's child. Instead, Victoria had suggested Maya was lying about the paternity, despite the timing making it impossible for anyone else to be the father. Now, standing in the storm with nowhere to go, Maya pulled the crumpled envelope from her backpack. She'd received it 3 days ago, forwarded from her old address through a chain of mail redirections. The law firm's name was embossed in gold lettering, Whitmore and Associates. The letter had seemed surreal when she first read it. Something about a grandfather she'd never known, an inheritance, a DNA test required to confirm her identity. Maya's mother had died 5 years ago without ever mentioning family beyond vague references to people who wouldn't understand. Maya had been planning to call the law firm after dealing with the Blackwood situation. Now, with rain soaking through her thin jacket and her dogs shivering, she realized she had no choice but to find out if this mysterious inheritance was real. A BMW pulled into the circular driveway, and Maya's heart lurched as she recognized the driver. Charles Blackwood, David's older brother, stepped out with his wife Stephanie. They were returning from some charity gala, no doubt, dressed in designer clothes that cost more than Maya used to make in 6 months. Charles spotted her immediately, his face twisting with disgust. "Jesus Christ," Victoria said she'd handled this. "Why are you still here?" "I'm leaving," Maya said quietly, shouldering her backpack. Stephanie wrinkled her nose. "Those animals are getting the steps all wet. This is marble imported from Italy." Maya bit back her response. These same people had once pretended to welcome her, had smiled and nodded when David announced their engagement. Now their true nature was on full display. David would be ashamed of how you're treating his child, Maya said, one hand on her belly. Charles laughed harshly. David was always a bleeding heart for strays. Look where it got him. As Maya walked down the driveway with her dogs trailing behind, she heard Stephanie mutter, "Good riddance to bad rubbish." Maya pulled out her phone with shaking fingers. Tomorrow she would call Whitmore and Associates. Tonight she would find shelter for herself and her dogs, even if it meant sleeping in her car again. She had no idea that tomorrow would begin the most extraordinary transformation of her life. The rain had turned from a gentle drizzle to a punishing downpour by the time Maya found shelter under the awning of a closed coffee shop. Her soaked clothes clung to her swollen belly, and she wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stop the violent shivering that had taken hold. The baby kicked restlessly, as if sensing her distress. She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers. The screen cracked from when Richard had knocked it from her hands during one of their fights. 3 missed calls from an unknown number, all within the last hour. Maya hesitated before calling back, wondering if it might be Richard with some cruel follow-up to her humiliation. "Miss Maya Chen?" The voice was crisp, professional, entirely unfamiliar. "Yes, this is Maya. My name is Jonathan Whitmore, senior partner at Whitmore and Associates. I represent the estate of Theodore Morrison. I've been trying to reach you regarding an urgent matter. Are you available to meet tomorrow?" Maya's heart lurched. Theodore Morrison. The name hit her like a physical blow, dragging up memories she'd spent years trying to bury. Her grandfather, though she'd never been allowed to call him that. The man who'd built a financial empire from nothing, who'd cut her mother out of his life completely when she'd married Maya's father. A struggling artist he deemed unworthy of the Morrison name. "I don't understand," Maya whispered, pressing closer to the building as wind whipped rain under the awning. "Why would his lawyer be calling me?" "I'm afraid I can't discuss the details over the phone. However, I can tell you that Mr. Morrison passed away 2 weeks ago, and you're named in his will. This matter requires immediate attention." The phone nearly slipped from Maya's wet hands. 2 weeks ago. He'd been dead for 2 weeks, and she'd known nothing about it. Not that she should have expected to be informed. She'd seen Theodore Morrison exactly twice in her 25 years of life, both times when her mother had made desperate attempts at reconciliation that had ended in bitter rejection. "Miss Chen, are you there?" "I'm here," she managed. "It's just, I can't imagine what he could have left me. We weren't close. Nevertheless, your presence is required for the reading of the will. Can you come to my office tomorrow at 10 a.m.? He rattled off an address in the city's financial district. Maya looked down at her ruined designer dress, a gift from Evelyn from better days when she'd still held hope that Maya might prove herself worthy. She owned nothing now, except the clothes on her back and the $43 in her wallet. "I'll be there," she said. The line went dead, leaving Maya alone with the sound of rain hammering against the concrete. She closed her eyes, one hand resting on her belly, trying to process this impossible turn of events. Theodore Morrison had built Morrison Industries into a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate. He'd been featured on magazine covers, had senators and presidents at his dinner table, and apparently he'd remembered the granddaughter he'd spent decades pretending didn't exist. Thunder crashed overhead, making her jump. She couldn't stay here all night, and she had nowhere else to go. Her few friends had long since grown tired of her drama with Richard's family. Her mother had died 3 years ago, taking with her any chance of understanding the full depth of Theodore's rejection. Maya pulled up a search for nearby shelters on her phone, but the first 2 she called were full. The third had a waiting list. She was about to try a fourth when she noticed a black sedan pulling up to the curb, its windows tinted dark against the storm. The driver's window rolled down, revealing a woman in her 50s with steel-grey hair pulled back in a severe bun. "Maya Chen?" Maya tensed, every instinct screaming danger. "Who's asking?" "Mr. Whitmore sent me. He was concerned about you being out in this weather in your condition." The woman's eyes flicked to Maya's pregnant belly. "I'm instructed to take you to a hotel for the night. Ensure you have everything you need for tomorrow's meeting. The offer was tempting. A warm, dry room, a real bed. But Maya had learned the hard way that nothing came without a price, especially from wealthy strangers. Why would he do that? Because your grandfather specifically requested that you be treated with the utmost care should anything happen to him. The woman's expression softened slightly. He left very detailed instructions about your welfare, Miss Chen. Get in the car. You're going to catch pneumonia out there. Maya hesitated for another moment, weighing her options. The baby kicked again, harder this time, as if making the decision for her. Whatever game this was, whatever her grandfather had planned from beyond the grave, it had to be better than dying of exposure in a storm. She opened the car door and slid into luxury that made the Ashford mansion seem modest by comparison. The rain had stopped, but Maya's clothes still clung to her skin as she pushed through the revolving doors of Blackstone and Associates. The law firm occupied 3 floors of the glass tower, all mahogany and marble that screamed old money. She'd never felt more out of place. "I'm here to see Mr. Blackstone," she told the receptionist, whose perfectly manicured eyebrows rose at Maya's disheveled appearance. "Maya Chen, I have an appointment." The woman's expression shifted from disdain to confusion as she checked her computer. "Oh, yes, of course. Please take a seat. Can I offer you some water? Coffee?" Maya shook her head, settling into a leather chair that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her hand rested protectively over her belly as she watched lawyers in expensive suits hurry past, their phones pressed to their ears, discussing deals worth more than she'd ever imagined. 20 minutes later, a tall man with silver hair emerged from the elevator. "Miss Chen? I'm Richard Blackstone. Please, come with me." His office overlooked the city's financial district. Maya caught a glimpse of the Hartwell Industries building in the distance, the empire that had just cast her out like garbage. The irony wasn't lost on her. "I have to say, Miss Chen, in 30 years of practicing law, I've never had to track down a beneficiary through homeless shelters." Blackstone settled behind his desk, studying her with sharp grey eyes. "Your grandfather was very specific about maintaining your anonymity until his death." "My grandfather." The words felt foreign on her tongue. "I still don't understand. My mother never mentioned—" Elizabeth Chen was Henry Ashworth's daughter from his first marriage. When she chose to marry your father against Henry's wishes, he disowned her. Blackstone opened a thick file, but he never stopped watching. He knew about you, Maya. He knew everything. Maya's throat tightened. While she'd grown up in foster care after her parents' death, someone had been watching. Someone who could have helped but chose not to. He regretted it, Blackstone continued, as if reading her thoughts. The watching, the distance. "He told me that losing Elizabeth nearly destroyed him, but his pride wouldn't let him reach out. He was determined not to make the same mistake with you. So he waited until he was dead to contact me. He wanted to ensure you could make your own choices, free from the influence of his wealth. But recent events..." Blackstone's expression darkened. "He had investigators keeping tabs on your well-being. When they reported what the Hartwell family did to you yesterday..." Maya's head snapped up. "He knew about that?" "Henry died 3 days ago, but yes, he'd been monitoring the situation. The Hartwell's treatment of you was the final catalyst for certain provisions in his will." Blackstone leaned forward. "Maya, your grandfather was worth $8.7 billion. As his sole living heir, you've just inherited everything." The room spun. Maya gripped the armrests of her chair, her knuckles white. "That's impossible." Ashworth Industries, the real estate portfolio, the investment funds, all of it. There are some charitable bequests, of course, but the vast majority comes to you. He slid a document across the desk. "This is just the overview. The full accounting will take weeks." Maya stared at the papers, the numbers blurring through her tears. Yesterday she'd been sleeping in a shelter. Today she was one of the wealthiest people in the country. "There's more," Blackstone said gently. "Your grandfather left specific instructions regarding the Hartwell family. He was quite detailed in his suggestions for how you might handle them." "What kind of suggestions?" Blackstone's smile was sharp as a blade. The Hartwell Group has been struggling financially. They've been courting Ashworth Industries for a partnership for months, something that could save their company from bankruptcy. They had no idea they were negotiating with your grandfather. Maya's pulse quickened. And now? Now they'll be negotiating with you, if you choose to negotiate at all. He pulled out another folder. Your grandfather also compiled detailed information about their business practices, their debts, their vulnerabilities. He believed in being thorough. Maya thought about Victoria's cruel smile, about being dragged from the house in the rain while pregnant, about James standing there silent, letting it happen. They called me trash, she whispered. Yes, well. Blackstone's voice was ice cold. Let's see how they feel about that when they discover exactly who they threw out in the rain. Maya stood, legs shaky but determination hardening in her chest. I want to see everything, all of it. I thought you might. Blackstone pressed a button on his desk. My assistant will arrange temporary housing somewhere appropriate for someone of your position. We'll also need to discuss security, media management, and establishing your corporate presence. As Maya prepared to leave, Blackstone called after her. One more thing. Your grandfather wanted me to tell you that he was proud of the woman you became despite everything. He said Elizabeth would be proud too. Maya nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Outside, the city looked different somehow, smaller, more manageable. The Hartwells had no idea what was coming. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cemetery as Elena stood before her grandfather's freshly covered grave. The funeral had been a spectacle, hundreds of mourners, most of whom had never truly known the man beneath the business empire. She'd watched from behind an oak tree, her worn coat pulled tight against the October chill as politicians and CEOs delivered hollow eulogies about Marcus Wellington's legacy. Now, in the quiet aftermath, she finally had her moment alone with him. I'm sorry I couldn't be there properly, Grandpa, she whispered, placing a single white rose on the disturbed earth. But I promise you, everything you taught me about strength and justice, I'm going to use it. A phone buzzed. Another message from David, the 20th since yesterday. Elena, please call me. We need to talk. This is insane. She deleted it without reading the full text. David had made his choice when he stood silent as his mother threw her into the street. Some bridges, once burned, left nothing but ash. The law offices of Blackstone, Martinez and Associates occupied 3 floors of a glass tower downtown. Elena had changed into the one professional outfit she owned, a navy dress she'd bought for job interviews that never led anywhere. The fabric was wrinkled from being stuffed in her backpack, but it would have to do. Miss Wellington, the receptionist's perfectly manicured eyebrows rose slightly at Elena's appearance. Mr. Blackstone is waiting for you in conference room A. James Blackstone was exactly as Elena remembered from childhood, tall, silver-haired, with eyes that missed nothing. He'd been her grandfather's attorney for 30 years and one of the few people who knew about Elena's true parentage. My dear girl, he said, rising from his seat. His expression shifted from professional courtesy to genuine concern as he took in her pale complexion and the way her dress hung loose on her diminished frame. Please, sit down. Would you like some water? Coffee? I'm fine. The lie came easily. She'd been surviving on crackers and whatever free samples she could find at grocery stores. You said in your message that there were matters to discuss regarding my grandfather's estate. Blackstone nodded gravely. Indeed. Though I must ask, are you currently in a safe living situation? You look... I'm managing. Elena's voice carried a steel that surprised them both. Please, Mr. Blackstone, what did my grandfather leave me? The attorney studied her for a long moment, then opened a thick manila folder. Your grandfather was very specific about his wishes regarding you, Elena. He updated his will just 6 months ago. He withdrew a document thick with legal language. To put it simply, he's left you everything. The words hit her like a physical blow. Everything? The Wellington Group? All subsidiaries? Real estate holdings, investment portfolios, liquid assets. Blackstone's voice was steady, professional. The total value is approximately $12 billion. You are now one of the wealthiest women in the country. Elena's hand moved instinctively to her stomach, where new life grew despite everything that had tried to tear her down. $12 billion. The number was so vast it felt abstract, meaningless. There are conditions, of course, Blackstone continued. Given your current circumstances, your grandfather established a trust structure. You'll have immediate access to $10 million for personal expenses and emergency needs. The remainder will be transferred to your full control in stages, with the final transfer completing on your 25th birthday. When do I turn 25? In 4 months. Elena leaned back in the leather chair, her mind racing. 4 months. By then, her baby would be born. By then, she could ensure her child never knew hunger, never felt the sting of rejection, never wondered if they were worthy of love. There's something else, Blackstone said softly. Your grandfather left you a letter. He handed her a cream-colored envelope with her name written in Marcus Wellington's familiar scrawl. Elena's fingers trembled as she opened it. My dearest Elena, the letter began, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've learned the truth about your inheritance. I know you're angry that I kept my distance while you were growing up. Your mother made me promise to let her raise you without the burden of the Wellington name, and I honored that promise even after she was gone. Perhaps that was a mistake. I've watched you from afar these past years. I know about the struggles, the rejection from people who should have embraced you. I know about the strength you've shown, the dignity you've maintained when others would have broken. That strength is why I'm entrusting you with everything I've built. Use it wisely, my dear girl. Use it to build the life you deserve. And if anyone has wronged you along the way, well, money is a powerful tool for many things, including justice. All my love, grandfather. Elena folded the letter carefully, her vision blurring with unshed tears. Outside the conference room windows, the city sprawled below, a city where just yesterday she'd been invisible, disposable. Not anymore. Mr. Blackstone, she said quietly, I'm going to need your help with something. The marble floors of Blackwood and Associates felt cold beneath Maya's worn sneakers as she followed the receptionist down a corridor lined with oil paintings of stern-faced men in expensive suits. Her hand instinctively moved to her belly, a protective gesture she'd developed over the past few weeks. The baby kicked gently as if sensing her nervousness. Mr. Blackwood will see you now, the receptionist announced, opening heavy mahogany doors to reveal an office that screamed old money and power. James Blackwood looked exactly like what Maya expected from her grandfather's attorney, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, and wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. He stood as she entered, his expression unreadable but not unkind. Please sit down, Miss Chen, or should I say Miss Ashworth. The name hit her like a physical blow. She'd been Maya Chen for 24 years, raised by loving adoptive parents who died in a car accident 3 years ago. The idea that she was connected to the Ashworth empire, that cold, distant world she'd only read about in financial magazines, felt surreal. I'm still processing all of this, she admitted, settling into the leather chair across from his imposing desk. The private investigator you sent barely explained anything before rushing off to catch a flight. Blackwood nodded, pulling out a thick file. Your grandfather was a complex man, Maya. May I call you Maya? At her nod, he continued. Theodore Ashworth spent the last 15 years of his life searching for you. He blamed himself for what happened to your mother. My mother? Maya's voice cracked slightly. Her adoptive parents had told her they knew nothing about her birth family, that she'd been abandoned as a baby. Rebecca Ashworth, Theodore's only child. Blackwood's expression softened marginally. She fell in love with a man Theodore disapproved of. Your father. When she refused to break off the relationship, Theodore cut her off completely. Too proud and too stubborn to admit he was wrong, even when she tried to reconcile after you were born. Maya felt tears prick at her eyes. What happened to her? To them, they died in a house fire when you were 6 months old. By the time Theodore swallowed his pride and tried to find you, you'd already been placed for adoption. The records were sealed, the trail cold. Blackwood leaned forward. He never stopped looking, never stopped regretting. The weight of it all pressed down on her shoulders. A grandfather who'd searched for her while she'd grown up believing she had no family left. Parents who died because of pride and stubbornness. It felt like a cruel joke of fate. "He left me everything," she asked, still unable to fully grasp the magnitude of what she'd been told. Everything. Ashworth Industries, the real estate holdings, investments, art collections, charitable foundations, all of it. Blackwood slid a document across the desk. The estate is valued at approximately $12 billion. The number didn't feel real. Yesterday she'd been counting quarters to afford a cup of coffee. Today she was supposedly one of the richest people in the country. "There are conditions, of course," Blackwood continued. "The will requires you to take an active role in running the company. Theodore didn't want his life's work to be managed by strangers. You'll need to learn the business, prove yourself capable of handling the responsibility." Maya thought about the Hawthorns, about Adrian's mother calling her trash, about being thrown out onto the street like she was nothing. The irony was almost too much to bear. How long do I have to decide? The inheritance is yours regardless. But if you want to claim your position as head of Ashworth Industries, you need to present yourself to the board within 90 days of Theodore's death. That gives you 2 months. 2 months to transform from a homeless pregnant woman into a billionaire CEO. It sounded impossible, but then again, so did everything else that had happened in the past week. "What about the Hawthorns?" she asked quietly. Blackwood's eyes sharpened with interest. "Ah, yes, your late husband's family. I understand there was some unpleasantness. They threw me out, called me a gold digger who was only after their money." Maya's voice hardened. "They took everything, Ryan, left me, said I had no legal claim to any of it." Interesting. Blackwood made a note on his legal pad. "As it happens, Ashworth Industries holds significant investments in several companies that do business with Hawthorne Enterprises. Theodore believed in keeping close tabs on potential opportunities. The implication wasn't lost on her. With a phone call, she could probably destroy everything the Hawthorns had built. The thought should have been satisfying, but instead it left her feeling empty. "I need time to think about all of this," she said finally. Blackwood nodded and handed her a business card along with a set of keys. Theodore maintained a penthouse apartment downtown. "It's yours now, fully staffed and secure. Take all the time you need, Maya. But remember, your grandfather spent 15 years trying to find you. Don't let his sacrifice be for nothing." The leather chair in Marcus Reed's office felt like a throne beneath Elena as she faced the 3 men who would determine her future. Her hands rested protectively over her growing belly, while Marcus spread documents across his mahogany desk, with the precision of a surgeon laying out instruments. "Before we proceed," Marcus said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses, "I need to ensure you understand the magnitude of what you're inheriting. Your grandfather's estate is valued at approximately $4.2 billion. The number hung in the air like smoke. Elena had known it would be substantial, but hearing it spoken aloud made her dizzy. 4 days ago, she'd been counting quarters for a bus ride. Now she was being told she owned more money than some small countries. "The bulk of the estate consists of Reed Industries," continued James Morrison, her grandfather's former business partner. His silver beard was meticulously trimmed, his suit immaculate. "We have manufacturing plants in 12 countries, real estate holdings across 6 continents, and a venture capital arm that's been particularly successful in tech investments." Elena nodded, trying to process the information while her mind wandered to the cramped motel room where she'd spent the previous night. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was homeless while inheriting a real estate empire. "However," Marcus interjected, his tone growing more serious, "there are conditions to consider. Your grandfather was very specific about how he wanted his legacy handled. The will stipulates that you must take an active role in the company within 90 days, or controlling interest transfers to a board of trustees. What does active role mean exactly? Elena asked, finding her voice. Dr. Sarah Chen, the estate's financial advisor, leaned forward. Your grandfather wanted to ensure the family legacy continued. You'd need to assume a position as either chairman or CEO, attend board meetings, and make strategic decisions. He believed in hands-on leadership. Elena's stomach churned, and not from morning sickness. She had a bachelor's degree in art history and had worked as a gallery assistant before her pregnancy made the long hours impossible. The idea of running a multi-billion-dollar corporation felt surreal. I know this is overwhelming, Marcus said gently, noting her pale complexion. Your grandfather included a provision for that. You can appoint an interim CEO to handle day-to-day operations while you learn the business. He recommended James for that role, if you're agreeable. James nodded respectfully. I worked with your grandfather for 30 years. I understand his vision and would be honored to help you transition into leadership. Elena studied the older man's face, searching for any hint of deception or opportunism. She'd learned to read people's intentions during her months navigating shelters and food banks, where kindness often came with strings attached. But James's expression held only patient professionalism. There's something else, Dr. Chen said, sliding another document across the desk. Your grandfather established a personal trust fund for you, separate from the business holdings. It's immediately accessible and contains $50 million for your personal use. Elena stared at the bank routing numbers on the paper. $50 million, personal use. The phrase felt foreign in her mouth when she'd been saving napkins from fast food restaurants just days before. I know you've been in difficult circumstances, Marcus said delicately. Your grandfather regretted losing touch with your mother. He blamed himself for the estrangement and wanted to ensure you'd never face financial hardship. He knew about me? Elena's voice cracked slightly. He hired investigators years ago, but your mother had changed her name and moved frequently. By the time he located you, you'd married into the Blackwood family. He didn't want to disrupt your life if you were happy and secure. Happy and secure. Elena almost laughed at the bitter irony. If only her grandfather had known how wrong his assumptions were. How the Blackwoods had treated her like an infection to be cut out and discarded. I need time to think, she said finally. Of course, Marcus replied. But Elena, I feel obligated to mention that time is somewhat of the essence. Your grandfather's will becomes public record in 6 weeks. Once that happens, the media attention will be intense. It would be better if you were prepared and had made your decisions before then. The implications hit her like cold water. Public record meant the Blackwoods would discover her inheritance. She imagined Victoria's perfectly composed face cracking when she learned the woman she'd called gold-digging trash was worth more than the Blackwood family fortune 10 times over. In the meantime, Dr. Chen said, handing Elena a black credit card, this is connected to your personal account. Please use it for anything you need. Housing, medical care, whatever would make you comfortable. Elena took the card with trembling fingers. Such a small piece of plastic, but it represented freedom from the fear that had haunted her for months. No more sleeping in her car. No more choosing between prenatal vitamins and groceries. As she left the law office, Elena felt the weight of possibility settling around her shoulders like an expensive coat. Revenge, she was beginning to realize, was indeed going to be very expensive, and she could afford it. The rain drummed against the shelter's windows as Elena stared at the legal documents spread across the small table. Her hand trembled slightly as she traced the letterhead of Morrison & Associates, one of the city's most prestigious law firms. The envelope had arrived that morning, forwarded from an address she barely remembered giving years ago. Mrs. Carter? The shelter coordinator, Mrs. Rodriguez, approached cautiously. You've been sitting here for an hour. Is everything all right? Elena looked up, her eyes still processing the impossible words she'd read and reread. I think there's been a mistake, she whispered. The letter was formal, requesting her immediate presence for the reading of her grandfather's will, but that was impossible. Her grandfather had died when she was 7, leaving behind only debt and disappointment, according to her mother. This letter spoke of someone named Vincent Ashford, a name that stirred something deep in her memory, like an echo from a half-forgotten dream. Her mother had always been secretive about family, especially after Elena's father died. There had been whispered phone calls that stopped when Elena entered the room, and once she'd found her mother crying over a returned letter marked "Return to Sender." When Elena asked about relatives, her mother would grow distant and change the subject. Sometimes, her mother had said once, staring out their apartment window, "Loving someone means protecting them from people who would never understand." Elena had assumed she meant protecting her from judgment about her father's gambling debts or their modest lifestyle. Now, sitting in this shelter with papers that claimed she was the sole heir to a fortune, those words took on an entirely different meaning. The baby kicked sharply, as if sensing her agitation. Elena pressed her hand to her belly, thinking of Marcus and his family. Just yesterday, Victoria Pemberton had looked at her with such disdain, as if Elena were something unclean that had contaminated her perfect family. The memory of being pushed out into the rain still burned. "You're nothing," Victoria had said. "You'll always be nothing." Elena's phone buzzed with another text from Marcus. "Please answer. We can work this out. Come home." Home. The word felt foreign now. The Pemberton mansion had never been her home. It had been a temporary stay in someone else's story. She could see that now, how they'd tolerated her because Marcus insisted, but never truly accepted her. The whispered conversations that stopped when she entered rooms, the way the staff looked through her rather than at her, the constant subtle reminders that she didn't belong. Mrs. Rodriguez sat down across from her. "Honey, I've seen a lot of women come through here. Whatever that paper says, you don't have to face it alone." Elena almost laughed at the irony. She'd felt more alone in the Pemberton mansion than she did in this shelter surrounded by strangers. At least here, no one pretended to care while simultaneously counting the days until she'd leave. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said. "If someone hurt you, treated you like you were worthless, and then you found out you had the power to make them pay, would you use it?" Mrs. Rodriguez studied her carefully. "That depends. Would making them pay heal what they broke in you, or would it just break something else?" Elena wasn't sure she cared about healing anymore. The gentle girl who'd believed in love conquering all had been left standing in the rain outside the Pemberton estate. What sat in this shelter was someone harder, shaped by betrayal and the sharp edges of reality. Her phone rang. Marcus again. This time, she answered. "Elena, thank God. Where are you?" "I've been looking everywhere." "Have you?" Her voice was steadier than she'd expected. "Or have you been looking where you expected to find me? The places someone like me would go? What's that supposed to mean?" "I love you. I want you to come home." "To the home where your mother threw me out? Where your father stood by and watched? Where you—" She paused, remembering his silence as his family's words cut into her. "Where you said nothing. I was in shock. I didn't know how to choose," she finished. "I know, and you chose. Maybe not with words, but silence is a choice too." The law office address stared up at her from the papers. Morrison and Associates specialized in estate law for the city's elite. If this letter was real, if Vincent Ashford had truly been her grandfather, then everything was about to change. "I have to go," she told Marcus. "Where?" "I'll meet you." "No." The word came out with surprising firmness. "You made your choice when it mattered. Now I'm making mine." She hung up and gathered the papers. Whatever waited for her at Morrison and Associates, whatever truth lay buried in her family's past, it had to be better than begging for scraps of acceptance from people who saw her as beneath them. The Pembertons thought they knew exactly who Elena Carter was. They were about to discover how wrong they'd been. The rain hammered against the windows of the penthouse as Maya stood in what had once been her grandfather's study, now legally hers. 3 days had passed since the will reading, and the reality of her inheritance was still settling in like morning fog. She ran her fingers along the mahogany desk, where countless business decisions worth billions had been made. "Ma'am?" James appeared in the doorway, his silver hair impeccably styled despite the early hour. "The investigators have completed their preliminary report on the Blackwood family." Maya turned from the window, her hand instinctively moving to her growing belly. At 5 months pregnant, she could no longer hide the gentle curve, and designer maternity clothes had replaced her threadbare thrift store finds. The transformation still felt surreal. "Tell me what they found." James opened a leather portfolio, his expression grave. Richard Blackwood's pharmaceutical company is facing several lawsuits for price gouging essential medications. They've raised insulin prices by 400% in the last 2 years alone. The irony wasn't lost on Maya. While she'd been scraping together coins for prenatal vitamins, her late husband's family had been profiting from others' medical desperation. And personally, Richard has been having an affair with his business partner's wife for 6 months. Margaret, meanwhile, has been embezzling from the children's charity she chairs. Small amounts, but consistent. James paused. "And there's something else. About your late husband, David." Maya's chest tightened. Even in death, David remained a complicated presence in her life. The man who'd loved her completely, but whose family had destroyed her. What about him? "He had a life insurance policy worth $2 million, changed the beneficiary to you 3 days before the accident." James's voice softened. "His parents had the insurance company deny your claim, citing a technicality about your marriage certificate filing date." The betrayal cut fresh and deep. Maya had struggled through her early pregnancy, rationing food and skipping meals, while the Blackwoods had stolen money that David had specifically left for her and their child, money that could have prevented those nights she'd gone to bed hungry, worried about the baby's development. "They stole from their own grandchild," she whispered. "Indeed. The insurance company has since discovered their error and is prepared to pay out immediately with interest and penalties." Maya walked to the window overlooking the city where she'd once been invisible among the homeless population. Now she commanded a view that represented more power than she'd ever imagined possible. The responsibility felt enormous, but so did the clarity of her purpose. "James, I want to make a donation, $5 million to the homeless shelter where I stayed. Anonymous for now, certainly." "And regarding the Blackwoods?" A smile played at Maya's lips, though it held no warmth. "I think it's time for some strategic investments. Doesn't Richard's company have a board meeting next week?" "Yes, ma'am. They're voting on the new CEO position since the current one is retiring. I want you to buy a controlling interest. Quietly. Use shell companies if necessary." Maya turned back to James, and he saw something steely in her eyes that reminded him remarkably of her grandfather. "I'm going to clean house." James nodded approvingly. "And the insurance money? Set up a trust fund for children who've lost parents." David would have liked that. Later that afternoon, Maya sat in her grandfather's favorite chair, reading through documents when her phone buzzed. The number was unknown, but she recognized the voice immediately. "Maya? It's Margaret Blackwood." The sound of her former mother-in-law's voice sent an unexpected chill through Maya's body. The last time they'd spoken, Margaret had screamed at her to never contact the family again, that her bastard child would never be acknowledged as a Blackwood. "Mrs. Blackwood." Maya kept her voice carefully neutral. We heard about your grandfather, about the inheritance." Margaret's tone was strained, artificial sweetness coating desperation. "Richard and I have been thinking perhaps we were too hasty in our grief after David's death. We said things. You threw me out while I was pregnant with your son's child. We were mourning. People do foolish things when they're grieving." Margaret's voice cracked with what sounded like tears, but Maya had learned not to trust appearances. "We want to make amends. Your family, and that baby, that's our grandchild." Maya closed her eyes, remembering the nights she'd cried herself to sleep, homeless and afraid, while these people lived in luxury built on others' suffering. You're absolutely right, Mrs. Blackwood. We are family. Maya's voice was honey over steel. Perhaps we should get together soon. I have so many ideas about how we can rebuild our relationship. After hanging up, Maya placed her hand on her belly, feeling the subtle flutter of movement within. "Don't worry, little one," she whispered. "Mommy's going to make sure you grow up in a much better world." The rain drummed against the penthouse windows as Elena sat across from Harrison Blackwell in his mahogany-paneled office, the city sprawling beneath them like a glittering carpet of ambition and broken dreams. The DNA results lay between them on the desk, official and undeniable, but she could see in his weathered eyes that he'd known the truth long before the tests confirmed it. "Your grandmother would have loved to meet you," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of decades. "Catherine always wondered what happened to your mother after she ran away. We hired investigators, but Sarah had simply vanished." Elena's hand instinctively moved to her growing belly. "She was protecting me from you." Perhaps she was right to. Harrison's admission hung in the air like smoke. We were different people then, harder, less forgiving. He paused, studying her face with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "But you're not here for forgiveness, are you? You're here for war." A smile played at Elena's lips, not warm, but sharp as winter wind. "The Ashfords destroyed my mother. They threw me out like garbage while I'm carrying their own blood. They have no idea what's coming. What do you want from me?" Elena leaned forward, her green eyes blazing with purpose. "Access, resources, the power to make them understand exactly what they've lost." She slid a folder across the desk. "I've done my research. Ashford Industries is leveraged to the hilt. They're bleeding cash on 3 different construction projects, and their main investor is getting nervous." Harrison opened the folder, his eyebrows rising as he scanned the documents. "How did you obtain this information?" "I told you, I'm not the broken girl they think I am. I graduated summa cum laude from Columbia before I met James. I know how to dig, how to analyze, how to find the pressure points that matter." Elena's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "But I need capital to move against them, real capital. And in return, I take my place as Catherine Blackwell's heir. I restore this family's name and expand its influence." She placed her hand on her stomach. "And I ensure the next generation grows up understanding the value of loyalty." Harrison was quiet for a long moment, his fingers steepled as he processed her proposal. Elena could practically hear the gears turning in his mind, the calculations, the risk assessments, the weighing of potential gains against possible losses. Finally, he reached into his desk drawer and withdrew a black credit card. "Unlimited access," he said, sliding it toward her. "But I want updates, daily, and I want to know every move before you make it." Elena pocketed the card, feeling its weight like a weapon in her hand. "The first move is already in motion. James's younger brother, Marcus, has been embezzling from the family's charitable foundation. Small amounts, but consistent. I have the records. How could you possibly?" "Marcus has a gambling problem. Bad enough that he's desperate, but not bad enough that he's been caught yet. I've been tracking his patterns for weeks." Elena stood, smoothing her dress over her belly. "I'm going to offer him a choice: work with me or watch his family discover his betrayal in the most public way possible." Harrison's laugh was dark and appreciative. "You really are Catherine's granddaughter." As Elena turned to leave, Harrison called out to her. "What about the baby? Have you told James?" Elena paused at the door, her hand on the crystal handle. "James made his choice when he stood by and watched his mother throw me out. This child will never know the Ashfords as anything but a cautionary tale." The elevator descended silently through the heart of the Blackwell building, each floor taking her further from her old life and closer to her new reality. Elena's phone buzzed, a text from Marcus Ashford, agreeing to meet her tomorrow at a discreet cafe downtown. He probably thought she was reaching out for help, playing the desperate ex-daughter-in-law card. He had no idea he was about to become her first pawn. As the elevator doors opened to the lobby, Elena caught her reflection in the polished steel. No longer the frightened girl who'd been cast out into the rain, but something harder, more dangerous. The designer dress Harrison had insisted on buying her fit perfectly, making her look every inch the billionaire heiress she'd never known she was. Her phone rang. James's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment her heart stuttered. Then she remembered his silence as his mother called her trash, his failure to defend her when she needed him most. Elena declined the call and blocked his number. Some bridges weren't worth rebuilding. Some wounds were meant to fester until they became something else entirely, something with teeth. Tomorrow, the real game would begin. The leather chair in Marcus Blackwood's office felt like a throne, and for the first time in weeks, Elena allowed herself to sink into its embrace. Across the mahogany desk, her grandfather's longtime attorney spread documents like a battle plan, each paper representing another weapon in her growing arsenal. The beauty of this approach, Marcus said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses, is that everything appears completely legitimate. Market forces, they'll call it, bad luck, poor timing. His smile was predatory. They'll never see your hand in it. Elena's fingers traced the rim of her teacup, steam curling between them like smoke signals. Tell me about the construction loan. Wellington Development borrowed heavily to break ground on their luxury hotel project. The loan comes due in 6 weeks. Marcus pulled out a thick folder. I've been quietly acquiring the debt through shell companies. As of yesterday, I own 70% of it. And if they can't pay? Default triggers immediate seizure of assets. The hotel, the land beneath it, and their primary office building downtown. Marcus leaned forward conspiratorially. That office building? It houses their corporate headquarters. Imagine Richard Wellington receiving an eviction notice from his own conference room. The irony wasn't lost on Elena. She remembered standing in that very conference room 3 months ago, her small suitcase at her feet while Richard delivered his ultimatum with clinical precision. You're not family. You never were. What about their other holdings? Now that's where it gets interesting. Marcus produced another file. Their investment portfolio is heavily weighted in tech stocks. Specifically, 3 companies that I happen to know are about to face some very public scandals. Elena raised an eyebrow. You can't manufacture corporate scandals, Marcus. I don't need to manufacture anything. I simply have excellent sources in investigative journalism, sources who've been sitting on stories about worker exploitation, environmental violations, and creative accounting practices. His fingers drummed against the desk. Sometimes the truth just needs the right moment to surface. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Elena watched pedestrians scurry along the sidewalk below, bundled against the October chill. Once, she'd been one of them, invisible, insignificant, struggling to survive each day. Now she held the power to reshape lives with a signature. There's something else, Marcus continued. Margaret Wellington's charity foundation. Elena's attention snapped back. Margaret's charitable work was her pride and joy, the source of her social standing among the city's elite. What about it? The foundation receives substantial tax benefits for their donations to overseas orphanages. However, my investigators have discovered that several of these orphanages exist only on paper. The money disappears into accounts controlled by Margaret's nephew in the Caymans. She's stealing from orphans? Elena's voice carried a mixture of disgust and satisfaction. Whether she knows it or not, she's complicit in a massive fraud. The IRS tends to take a dim view of such arrangements, especially when accompanied by detailed documentation and witness testimony. Elena stood and walked to the window, her reflection ghost-like against the glass. Her pregnancy was beginning to show now, a gentle curve beneath her silk blouse, designer clothes that felt like armor against the world that had rejected her. How long before everything unfolds? I can trigger the sequence whenever you're ready. The construction loan default happens first. That's unavoidable given the timeline. The stock scandal breaks 2 weeks later. The charity investigation launches the following month. Marcus gathered the papers with methodical precision. By Christmas, the Wellington family will be facing bankruptcy, criminal investigation, and social exile. By Christmas. Elena calculated quickly. She'd be 7 months pregnant by then, preparing for the arrival of the child the Wellingtons had dismissed as worthless. The child who would inherit everything they'd lost. Do it, she said quietly. Are you certain? Once this begins, there's no stopping it. The Wellingtons will lose everything. Elena thought of James wherever he was now. Did he ever wonder about her? About their child? Or had his family's poison finally convinced him that she was just another fortune hunter who'd gotten what she deserved? They made their choice when they threw a pregnant woman into the street, she said. I'm simply ensuring they understand the consequences. Marcus nodded and reached for his phone. I'll make the calls this afternoon. The loan officers will receive their instructions by tomorrow morning. As Elena gathered her purse and coat, Marcus cleared his throat. For what it's worth, your grandfather would be proud. Harold never forgot a slight, and he never forgave betrayal. You're more his granddaughter than you know. Walking to the elevator, Elena caught her reflection in the polished steel doors. The broken girl who'd slept in her car was gone, replaced by someone harder, more calculating, someone who understood that mercy was a luxury the wealthy never extended to the powerless. The elevator descended smoothly toward the lobby, carrying her toward a future where justice and vengeance were indistinguishable, and where the Wellington family's sins would finally come home to roost. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Blackwood Industries boardroom as Maya reviewed the latest acquisition reports. 3 weeks had passed since she'd taken control of the company, and already the ripple effects were spreading through the city's business community like wildfire. She traced her finger along the list of properties and businesses she now owned, her eyes stopping at one particular entry that made her pulse quicken. Harrison Development Group, the crown jewel of the Harrison family's empire. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, not looking up from the documents. "Mrs. Blackwood?" Her assistant's voice carried a note of uncertainty. "There's a delegation here to see you. The Harrison family." Maya's hand stilled on the paper. She'd been expecting this visit, though perhaps not quite so soon. "Send them in." The door opened, and in walked Charles Harrison, flanked by his wife Victoria and their son David, the same David who had promised to love and cherish her, who had sworn their baby would want for nothing. The irony wasn't lost on her that he now stood in her boardroom, hat in hand. Charles stepped forward first, his usual commanding presence notably diminished. "Miss Blackwood, thank you for seeing us. Please, sit." Maya gestured to the chairs across from her desk, noting how Victoria's designer handbag trembled slightly in her grip. David, meanwhile, couldn't seem to meet her eyes. "I'll be direct," Charles began, settling into his chair with forced confidence. "We understand you've acquired significant holdings in our company. We're here to discuss terms for their return." Maya leaned back in her leather chair, studying their faces. "Return? I wasn't aware I'd borrowed anything." Victoria's composure cracked slightly. "Surely you must understand the position this puts us in. Our family has built that company over 3 generations, and now it belongs to someone else," Maya interrupted smoothly. "That's how business works, Mrs. Harrison. I'm surprised you need that explained to you." David finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "What do you want? Money? We can negotiate a fair price." "Fair?" Maya stood and walked to the window, her back to them. "Tell me, David, what would you consider fair compensation for throwing a pregnant woman onto the street in the middle of winter?" The silence that followed was deafening. Maya could hear Victoria's sharp intake of breath, could sense Charles shifting uncomfortably in his chair. "You see," Maya continued, turning to face them, "I've recently learned quite a lot about fairness, about how the powerful treat those they consider beneath them, about how easily promises can be broken when it's convenient." Recognition dawned slowly in David's eyes, his face going pale. "Maya?" "Hello, David." She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I have to say you look surprised. Did you think I'd simply disappear, fade away into nothing like the trash your family believed me to be?" Victoria's hand flew to her throat. "But how? You were homeless, pregnant, you had nothing." "I had everything," Maya said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of steel. "I just didn't know it yet. You see, Mrs. Harrison, while you were busy deciding I wasn't worthy of your son. My grandfather, my very wealthy, very powerful grandfather, was dying, alone, looking for the granddaughter he'd spent years trying to find. Charles leaned forward, his business mind clearly working. Malcolm Blackwood was your grandfather? That's impossible. We would have known. Would you? Because, from what I remember, you never bothered to ask about my family. You took one look at my circumstances and decided you knew everything about me. Maya returned to her desk, picking up a photograph from the corner. This was taken the day before he died. He kept it on his nightstand, a picture of my mother, his daughter, who he lost when she was barely 18, the daughter who had me, his only grandchild. David stood abruptly, running his hands through his hair. Maya, if you had known what? You would have treated me differently? You would have convinced your parents I was worthy of basic human decency? She set the photograph down carefully. That says everything I need to know about your character, David. Victoria's voice came out as a whisper. What about the baby? Is it healthy and beautiful? Maya replied, her tone softening for the first time. No thanks to your family's care and concern. Charles cleared his throat, attempting to regain control of the conversation. What do you want from us? What will it take to resolve this situation? Maya smiled, and this time there was genuine amusement in her expression. Resolve it? Oh, Charles, we're just getting started. You see, this isn't about what I want from you. This is about what you've already given me, a lesson in exactly how the world works when you have power. She pressed a button on her desk. Security will escort you out. I suggest you use the time to consider how it feels to be on the other side of dismissal. As they were led away, Maya placed her hand on her stomach, feeling the gentle movement within. Some lessons, she reflected, were worth every penny they cost. The mahogany-paneled boardroom fell silent as Sophia entered, her heels clicking against the polished marble floor with measured precision. Every eye in the room turned toward her, and she savored the moment of shocked recognition that rippled through the assembled Blackwood Industries executives and board members. "Good morning," she said smoothly, taking her seat at the head of the massive conference table. "I trust you've all had time to review the documents my legal team forwarded yesterday." Richard Blackwood sat frozen 3 seats down, his face drained of color. Margaret clutched her Hermes bag so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Neither had spoken since Sophia had walked through the door, though their mouths had fallen open in perfect synchronization. "There must be some mistake," stammered Howard Chen, the company's longtime CFO. "Miss Sterling, while we appreciate your interest in our company, this is a private board meeting for family members and—" "I am family," Sophia interrupted, her voice carrying the same quiet authority she'd learned from watching her grandfather conduct business. "As my documentation clearly proves, I am Elena Blackwood's daughter, making me Harold Blackwood's granddaughter and legitimate heir." She opened her leather portfolio and slid copies of the DNA test results across the table. The papers rustled like autumn leaves in the sudden tension. "This is impossible," Richard finally found his voice, though it cracked on the last syllable. "Elena died in that car accident. She never had children." Sophia's smile was arctic. "Elena survived the accident you orchestrated to remove her from the family fortune. She lived quietly for years, changed her name, and raised me far from your toxic influence. When she died 5 years ago, she made sure I had everything I needed to claim what's rightfully mine." Margaret's composure cracked first. "You're that little gold-digging whore who trapped David. You can't seriously expect us to believe this fantasy." "The DNA doesn't lie, Margaret." Sophia's tone remained conversational, but her eyes glittered dangerously. "Neither do the private investigators who've been documenting your family's activities for the past decade. Would you like me to share what they discovered about your involvement in Elena's supposed death?" The color drained from Margaret's face so quickly that Sophia almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Harold left very specific instructions in a sealed addendum to his will," continued Sophia, turning her attention to the lawyers present. instructions that were only to be opened if his true heir ever came forward with proper documentation. My legal team has already presented those documents to the probate court. She gestured toward the distinguished woman sitting to her right. Miss Patricia Morse from Morse and Associates will outline the implications. Patricia stood, her silver hair gleaming under the boardroom's crystal chandelier. As of this morning, Miss Sterling controls 68% of Blackwood Industries' voting shares, plus the family trust, the real estate holdings, and all associated assets. The transition is effective immediately. "That's impossible," Richard sputtered, his face now matching his burgundy tie. "Father would never—" "Your father discovered the truth about Elena shortly before his death," Patricia continued implacably. "He'd been searching for her for 30 years, and when he learned she'd died without knowing he'd been looking for her, he made provisions for any children she might have had. Miss Sterling's claim has been thoroughly verified." Sophia felt a flutter of movement in her belly and placed her hand protectively over the small bump. The baby seemed to approve of the proceedings. "There will, of course, be changes," she announced, her voice carrying clearly through the shocked silence. "Effective immediately, Richard, you're removed from your position as CEO. Margaret, your access to all family accounts has been revoked. David—" she paused, savoring the moment. "David's trust fund has been frozen pending a full audit of his activities." "You can't do this to us," Margaret whispered, her usual imperious tone reduced to a croak. "We're family. We've run this company for—" "You've stolen from this company for decades," Sophia corrected. "The private dinners charged to corporate accounts, the family vacations disguised as business trips, the consulting fees paid to shell companies you control. Did you really think no one would ever notice?" She stood, smoothing down her tailored black dress. "I'm implementing new management effective Monday. The board will be restructured with independent directors who actually understand fiduciary responsibility." Richard tried one last desperate gambit. "The shareholders will never accept this. They'll revolt when they see the stock price." "The stock price has already risen 12% since news of the ownership change broke this morning," Patricia interjected with obvious satisfaction. "The market has been waiting for new leadership at Blackwood Industries for quite some time." Sophia gathered her papers, the rustling sound unnaturally loud in the devastated silence. "You have 48 hours to vacate the family properties. Security will escort you out if necessary." She paused at the door, turning back one final time. "Oh, and Margaret, next time you call someone trash, you might want to make sure you know who their grandfather is." The door closed behind her with a definitive click that echoed like a gavel falling. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Blackstone Industries boardroom as Maya adjusted the collar of her tailored black suit. 3 weeks had passed since she'd claimed her inheritance, and the transformation was complete, at least on the surface. Her hair was styled in an elegant chignon, her makeup flawless, her posture radiating the confidence that came with controlling a $12 billion empire. Across the mahogany table sat her team of lawyers, each one hand-picked for their particular expertise in corporate warfare. Maya's hand rested protectively over her growing belly as she reviewed the documents one final time. The baby kicked, as if sensing the importance of this moment. "The Whitmore family has no idea what's coming," said Patricia Chen, Maya's lead attorney. "Their real estate portfolio is entirely leveraged, and we've quietly acquired the debt on their primary assets through shell companies. When we call in these loans simultaneously—" "They'll lose everything," Maya finished, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions churning inside her. "The penthouse, the Hampton estate, the yacht, even the family business, all of it." Marcus, her financial advisor, slid another folder across the table. "We've also identified the charity gala they're hosting next week. The Children's Hospital fundraiser. It's their biggest social event of the year. All of high society will be there." Maya's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Perfect. I assume our donation has been processed?" $5 million, making you the evening's largest benefactor," You'll be seated at the head table, directly across from Catherine Whitmore." The memory of that night 3 weeks ago still burned fresh in Maya's mind. Catherine's cold voice echoing through the mansion's marble foyer, the contempt in her eyes as she'd called security to physically remove Maya from the premises, the way she'd laughed when Maya had begged for just one chance to explain, to prove she was worthy of their son. "Mrs. Blackstone?" Patricia's voice pulled Maya from her thoughts. "Should we proceed with the timeline we discussed?" Maya nodded slowly. "Yes, but I want to make one addition. Find out everything you can about their charitable giving, how much of their reputation is built on their philanthropy." "Quite a bit," Marcus replied, consulting his tablet. "Catherine sits on the boards of 6 major charities. Richard is a patron of the arts. Their social standing depends heavily on being seen as generous benefactors." "Then we'll give them a choice," Maya said, rising from her chair. She walked to the window, watching the rain streak down the glass like tears. They can liquidate their charitable foundations to pay their debts, destroying their reputation in the process, or they can face bankruptcy and public humiliation. Her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at the screen and felt her heart skip. It was from James. "Maya, please. We need to talk. I know you're alive. I know you're back in the city. Whatever you're planning, there has to be another way." Maya deleted the message without responding, just as she had the previous dozen attempts. Some wounds cut too deep for words to heal. "There's one more thing," Patricia said carefully. "Our investigators have uncovered some interesting information about James Whitmore's recent activities. After you disappeared, it seems he's been searching for you quite desperately." "I don't want to hear about James," Maya said sharply, turning back to face the room. "He made his choice that night. He stood there and let them throw me out like garbage. But Mrs. Blackstone, he filed a missing person report. He's hired 3 different private investigators. He even liquidated his trust fund and has been visiting homeless shelters across the city, looking for you." Maya's composure wavered for just a moment. She pressed her lips together, forcing herself to remain calm. "It doesn't matter. His family's actions speak louder than his guilt." Her assistant knocked and entered the room. "Mrs. Blackstone? There's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent and that it's about the Whitmore family." Maya frowned. "I'm not taking unscheduled appointments. She said to tell you her name is Elena Rodriguez. She used to work for the Whitmores as their housekeeper." The name meant nothing to Maya, but something in her assistant's tone suggested this wasn't a casual visit. "Send her in." Elena Rodriguez was a small, nervous woman in her 50s who clutched a manila envelope like her life depended on it. She took one look at Maya, and her eyes widened with recognition. "You're the girl," she whispered, "the one Mrs. Whitmore threw out that night. I couldn't live with myself knowing what I know and not telling you." Maya gestured for her to sit. "What are you talking about?" Elena's hands shook as she opened the envelope. "I clean Mr. James's room every week. Has for 10 years. I found these hidden in his desk drawer after you left. I think you need to see them." She spread out dozens of photographs across the conference table. Maya's breath caught. They were pictures of her, hundreds of them, taken from a distance over months. Pictures of her at the coffee shop where she used to work, walking through the park, sitting alone on benches, and written on the back of each one, in James's handwriting, was a single word: beautiful. The morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Sterling Industries boardroom as Maya adjusted her black Armani suit, her hand instinctively moving to her growing belly. At 6 months pregnant, she could no longer hide her condition, but she wore it now like armor, a reminder of everything the Blackwood family had tried to destroy. "The final documents are ready for your signature, Miss Sterling," her lawyer, Patricia Chen, said quietly. "Once you sign these, the Blackwood Group will officially be under Sterling Industries' umbrella. The acquisition is complete." Maya nodded, her fingers tracing the edge of the contract. 3 months ago she'd been sleeping in her car, discarded like garbage by the very family whose empire now rested in her hands. The irony wasn't lost on her. "There's something else," Patricia continued, sliding another folder across the mahogany table. Our investigation team found additional information about your mother's accident. Maya's breath caught. What kind of information? Security footage from a traffic camera 3 blocks away. It shows a black sedan following your mother's car for at least 2 miles before the intersection where the accident occurred. Patricia's voice was steady, professional, but Maya could see the concern in her eyes. The license plate traces back to a rental car company. The renter paid in cash, used a fake ID. The pen trembled in Maya's hand. You think someone killed her? I think someone wanted it to look like an accident. The question is, who knew about your mother's relationship to Charles Sterling, and who stood to benefit from keeping that secret buried? Maya's phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. Congratulations on your business success. We should talk. Eleanor Blackwood. She showed the message to Patricia, who frowned. That's interesting timing. She's never contacted me directly before. Everything always went through Richard. Maybe she's finally realized the gravity of her situation. The Blackwood Group's bankruptcy filing becomes public tomorrow. Their creditors are circling, and word is spreading that a Sterling Industries subsidiary bought their debt. Maya stood, walking to the window that overlooked the city. Somewhere out there, Eleanor and Richard Blackwood were probably scrambling, trying to understand how their carefully ordered world had crumbled so completely. They still didn't know who she really was. The acquisition had been handled through shell companies and intermediaries. To them, she was still just the homeless girl they'd thrown away, while some mysterious corporate raider destroyed their legacy. Schedule a meeting, Maya said finally. Today. I want to see her face when she realizes who's been pulling the strings. 2 hours later, Maya sat in the penthouse restaurant of the Four Seasons, watching Eleanor Blackwood navigate between tables with the same imperious grace she remembered. Even facing financial ruin, Eleanor looked immaculate in her Chanel suit, her silver hair perfectly coiffed. Eleanor's composure cracked for just a moment when she saw Maya. You're pregnant. 6 months, Maya replied coolly, gesturing to the chair across from her. Please, sit. Eleanor remained standing, her eyes narrowing. I don't understand why you wanted to meet. If you're looking for some kind of reconciliation with David, you're wasting your time. He's moved on. Has he? Maya smiled, pulling out her phone to show Eleanor a photo. It was David, taken yesterday outside a downtown bar, looking haggard and thin, clearly several drinks past sober. Your son doesn't look like a man who's moved on. He looks like a man drowning in guilt. What do you want? Eleanor's voice was sharp now, her mask of civility slipping. I want you to sit down and listen to a story, Maya said. It's about a woman named Sarah Sterling who fell in love with a poor man named Michael Chen, about how she gave up everything, her family, her fortune, her father's love for that man, about how she died in a car accident 25 years ago, leaving behind a daughter who grew up never knowing she had a grandfather who loved her enough to leave her everything. Eleanor's face went white. She sank into the chair, her hands gripping her purse so tightly her knuckles showed white through her thin skin. You're lying, Eleanor whispered. Maya reached into her briefcase and pulled out a photograph, one of her mother and Charles Sterling at a company picnic, Sarah visibly pregnant, Charles's hand resting protectively on her shoulder. This was taken 6 months before I was born, 3 months before Sarah Sterling died in that very convenient accident. Charles Sterling is dead, Eleanor said, but her voice lacked conviction. Yes, he is, and he left everything to his only living heir. Maya leaned forward, her voice soft but deadly. Congratulations, Eleanor. You threw away a billionaire's granddaughter like she was trash. Now that trash owns everything you've ever worked for, including your son's future. The color drained completely from Eleanor's face as the magnitude of her mistake finally hit home. The mahogany doors of the Sterling Industries boardroom swung open with theatrical precision as Maya entered, her heels clicking against the polished marble floor. She had traded her thrift store clothes for a tailored navy suit that hugged her figure perfectly. Her dark hair swept into an elegant chignon. The transformation was complete. Gone was the desperate young woman they had thrown out like garbage. Around the massive conference table sat the board members, their faces a mixture of curiosity and barely concealed disdain. At the head sat Richard Sterling, his weathered face pale as he processed what his assistant had whispered in his ear moments before. Vivian clutched her pearl necklace, her knuckles white with tension. "Ladies and gentlemen," Maya began, her voice carrying the authority she had inherited along with billions of dollars, "I believe introductions are in order, though some of you already know me." Her gaze lingered on the Sterlings. "You knew me as the unwanted wife of your deceased son, the woman you deemed unworthy of your family name." James walked in behind her, carrying a leather briefcase, his presence both protective and professional. The board members' eyes tracked between them, confusion evident in their expressions. "What is the meaning of this?" Richard's voice cracked slightly. "You have no business here." Maya smiled, the expression cold and calculated. "On the contrary, I have every business here. You see, 3 weeks ago, Harrison Blackwood died. Perhaps you knew him. He was quite prominent in our circles, owned several companies that compete directly with Sterling Industries." She moved around the table slowly, deliberately, watching recognition dawn on several faces. Harrison Blackwood's death had made headlines in every financial publication. "The interesting thing about Mr. Blackwood," Maya continued, "is that he left his entire fortune to a granddaughter he'd never met. A granddaughter whose existence had been hidden from him by a daughter who ran away 25 years ago to marry a man he disapproved of." Vivian's face had drained of all color. "That's impossible." "Is it?" Maya stopped directly across from them, placing her palms flat on the table. "My mother, Sarah Chen, was born Sarah Blackwood. She gave up everything, her inheritance, her family, her name, for love. And when she died giving birth to me, my father honored her wishes and kept me away from the Blackwood empire." James opened his briefcase and withdrew several documents, sliding them across the table. DNA tests, birth certificates, legal documentation, all verified by 3 independent firms. Richard picked up the papers with trembling hands, his eyes scanning the text. Maya watched his face crumble as the reality sank in. "The woman you threw out of your home," Maya said softly, "the woman whose baby you called worthless, happens to be worth approximately $14 billion. And she's very, very unhappy with how your family has treated her." "Maya," Vivian whispered, her voice breaking, "we didn't know." "You didn't care to know." The words cut through the room like a blade. "You judged me based on my clothes, my bank account, my address. You decided I wasn't good enough for your family without ever asking who I was." She walked to the windows overlooking the city, her hand unconsciously moving to her rounded belly. At 5 months, her pregnancy was visible now, a constant reminder of what the Sterlings had rejected. "But I'm not here for apologies," Maya continued, turning back to face them. "I'm here for business. You see, Blackwood Industries has been looking to expand into new markets, and Sterling Industries has several properties and contracts that would fit perfectly into our portfolio." Richard's eyes widened with understanding and fear. "You're talking about a hostile takeover." "I prefer to think of it as aggressive expansion." Maya's smile was razor-sharp. "I've already purchased 30% of your outstanding shares through various shell companies. Another 20%, and I'll have controlling interest." "This is blackmail," Richard sputtered, rising from his chair. James stepped forward. "Mrs. Sterling, excuse me, Miss Blackwood, has prepared an offer for your remaining shares. The price is quite generous, considering your recent quarterly losses." Maya placed a single sheet of paper on the table. The number at the bottom was substantial but far less than the company's worth just months ago. "You have 48 hours to consider the offer," she said, moving toward the door. "After that, I'll acquire the shares I need through other means, and the price will be significantly lower." She paused at the threshold, looking back at the family who had cast her aside. "Oh, and Richard, When this is finished, you'll understand exactly what it feels like to lose everything because someone decided you weren't worthy enough. The baby you rejected will inherit an empire that makes your little company look like a corner store. The doors closed behind her with a soft click, leaving the Sterling family to contemplate the ruins of their world. The mahogany conference table stretched before Elena like a battlefield, its polished surface reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights overhead. She sat at the head, her hands folded calmly despite the storm brewing in her chest. Across from her, the Blackwood family huddled together like cornered animals, Victoria's face pale as parchment, Richard's jaw twitching with barely contained rage, and James looking as though he might be sick. Her lawyer, Margaret Chen, shuffled through a stack of documents with practiced efficiency. The first matter concerns the wrongful termination lawsuit filed against Blackwood Industries. Mrs. Blackwood, your company's HR records show a pattern of discrimination against pregnant employees, with Elena's case being particularly egregious. Victoria's voice cracked like brittle ice. This is preposterous. We followed all proper procedures. Proper procedures don't include calling someone worthless trailer trash in front of witnesses, Margaret interrupted smoothly. We have 3 employees willing to testify about the hostile work environment you created. Elena watched Victoria's composure crumble, remembering every humiliating moment she'd endured in that sterile office building. The whispered comments, the deliberately excluded meetings, the way Victoria had smiled while destroying her career piece by piece. Richard slammed his fist on the table, making his coffee cup rattle. What do you want? Money? Name your price and end this circus. A smile played at Elena's lips, the same cold smile she'd inherited from her grandfather. Oh, Richard. You still don't understand, do you? This isn't about money anymore. She nodded to Margaret, who slid another document across the table. This concerns the foreclosure proceedings on the Blackwood estate. Morningside Bank, which holds your mortgage, was recently acquired by Sterling Holdings. The new ownership has decided to call in all outstanding debts immediately. The color drained from James's face as he scanned the papers. This is impossible. We have another 10 years on this mortgage. You can't just... Actually, we can. Elena's voice remained steady, professional. According to the acceleration clause in your original agreement, the full balance becomes due upon change of ownership. You have 30 days. Victoria's hands shook as she reached for the document. $2.8 million. We don't have that kind of liquid capital. The business accounts are frozen, Margaret confirmed, pending resolution of the discrimination lawsuit and several other legal matters that have recently come to light, including some very interesting discrepancies in your tax filings from the past 3 years. The silence that followed was deafening. Elena could hear her own heartbeat, steady and strong like a drum counting down to victory. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see the city sprawling below, the same city where she wandered homeless just months ago, carrying their grandchild while they celebrated her exile. James finally found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. Elena, please, we made mistakes, terrible mistakes. But this will destroy everything our family built over generations. Your family? Elena stood slowly, her hand unconsciously moving to her rounded belly where her daughter, their granddaughter, kicked restlessly. When exactly did I become family to you, James? Was it before or after your mother threw me out like garbage? Victoria's mask finally slipped completely, revealing the desperation beneath. We didn't know who you were. How could we have known about your grandfather? You didn't know because you never bothered to learn. Elena's voice carried the weight of all her sleepless nights, all her fear and uncertainty. You saw a girl from the wrong side of town and decided I wasn't worth basic human decency. My bloodline doesn't change that. Richard's face had turned an alarming shade of red. So what now? You destroy us all? What about James? What about your marriage? Elena looked at her husband, really looked at him. For the first time in months, she saw the weak chin that had once seemed sensitive, the pale eyes that had never quite met hers when his family was cruel. the hands that had never reached for hers when she needed support most. "What marriage?" she asked quietly. "The one where my husband stood by while his family humiliated me? Where he chose his trust fund over his wife and child?" James lurched forward, reaching across the table toward her. "I was going to leave them. I was planning to choose you, I swear. I just needed time." Time. Elena tasted the word like bitter medicine. "I gave you 9 months, James, 9 months to stand up for us. Instead, you let them kick your pregnant wife into the street." Margaret gathered her papers with crisp efficiency. "We'll expect your response to all pending legal matters within 48 hours. The foreclosure timeline remains unchanged." She paused at the door, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. "Oh, and one more thing. Sterling Holdings has also acquired Blackwood Industries' primary competitor. The merger announcement goes public tomorrow morning." Elena walked past her former family without another glance, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown timer. Behind her, she heard Victoria begin to sob, the ugly, desperate sound of someone who had finally realized that their chickens had come home to roost. The elevator doors closed on their devastation, and Elena smiled. The mahogany doors of the Whitmore Industries boardroom seemed heavier than usual as Elena pushed them open, her heels clicking against the marble floor with a confidence she'd never possessed before. 6 months ago, she'd been sleeping in her car, clutching her swollen belly and wondering where her next meal would come from. Now, she commanded the attention of every person in the room, including the 3 people who had destroyed her life. Margaret Blackwell sat frozen in her leather chair, her face drained of all color. Beside her, Charles gripped the armrest so tightly his knuckles had turned white, while their son David, her former husband, stared at her with a mixture of shock and dawning horror. "Ladies and gentlemen," Elena said, her voice carrying across the room with crystalline clarity, "thank you for attending this emergency board meeting. As you know, the recent acquisition of Blackwell Enterprises by Whitmore Industries has raised some concerns about the future direction of both companies." She moved to the head of the conference table where a thick manila folder waited. Her assistant, James, stood discreetly by the wall, tablet in hand, ready to execute whatever orders she gave. "Mrs. Blackwell," Elena continued, savoring each word, "I believe you once told me that I would never amount to anything, that I was, and I quote, garbage from the gutter who trapped your precious son." Her eyes found Margaret's terrified gaze. "You also mentioned that I would never understand what it meant to have real power or money." Margaret's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish gasping for air. Elena opened the folder, revealing the documents that would seal the Blackwell family's fate. "As the new majority owner of your company, I've had the opportunity to review your financial records quite thoroughly. Imagine my surprise when I discovered several irregularities." Charles finally found his voice. "Elena, surely we can discuss this privately. There's no need to involve the board in family matters." "Family matters?" Elena's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "You mean like when you had security escort me from your home while I was 7 months pregnant, or when you blocked my access to David's bank accounts, leaving me homeless and destitute? Those family matters?" David shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Elena, I tried to find you. After the baby was born, I looked everywhere." "You looked?" Elena's voice rose slightly, the only crack in her composed facade. "You looked for the woman you abandoned? The woman carrying your child?" She pulled out a photograph from the folder. "Let me introduce you to someone you've never met. This is Sarah, your daughter. She's 4 months old now, and she's never seen her father because her father chose his trust fund over his own family." The room fell silent except for the sound of Margaret's ragged breathing. Elena continued, her voice returning to its controlled tone. "But I'm not here for emotional reunions. I'm here for business. Charles, your embezzlement of client funds over the past 3 years totals approximately $12 million. The falsified tax documents add another layer of federal charges that I'm sure the IRS would find fascinating." "You can't prove any of that," Charles said, but his voice lacked conviction. Actually, I can. Elena nodded to James, who stepped forward with a stack of documents. Bank records, email correspondence, witness statements from your former accountant, who, by the way, kept excellent records before you fired him for asking uncomfortable questions. Margaret finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. What do you want? Elena walked slowly around the table, stopping behind David's chair. He flinched as her hand briefly touched his shoulder, the same shoulder she used to rest her head against when they were happy, when she believed their love could overcome anything. I want you to understand what powerlessness feels like, she said softly. I want you to know what it's like to have everything stripped away by people who see you as less than human. She returned to her position at the head of the table. Effective immediately, Blackwell Enterprises will be dissolved. The company assets will be liquidated, with proceeds going to establish a foundation for homeless pregnant women, something close to my heart, as you might imagine. You're destroying everything my family built, Margaret said, tears streaming down her face. No, Elena replied. I'm finishing what you started when you threw me away like trash. The difference is, I'm giving you more dignity than you gave me. You'll receive a severance package, enough to live comfortably but modestly. The lifestyle you've been accustomed to, however, is over. She gathered her papers, preparing to leave. Oh, and David, if you ever want to meet your daughter, you know where to find me. But understand this, I'll never be the desperate woman begging for your family's acceptance again. If you want to be in Sarah's life, you'll do so on my terms. As Elena walked toward the door, Margaret called out desperately, We didn't know who you were. If we had known about your grandfather. Elena stopped, turning back one final time. That's exactly the point. You should have treated me with respect because I was human, not because of my bank account. The doors closed behind her with a soft click, sealing the Blackwell family's fate. The marble steps of the Blackwood mansion felt different beneath Maya's Louboutin heels, no longer cold and unwelcoming, but like a pedestal she was meant to stand upon. 6 months had passed since she'd been thrown from these very doors, broken and bleeding, carrying nothing but shame and her unborn child. Now she returned as Maya Chen-Blackwood, sole heir to the Chen Empire, with little Emma sleeping peacefully in her designer carrier. Victoria Blackwood's face went ashen when the door opened. Behind her, Richard's champagne flute slipped from his fingers, crystal shattering against Italian marble in a sound that seemed to echo Maya's own breaking heart from that terrible night. Hello, Victoria. Richard Maya's voice carried the polished confidence that months of boardroom battles had honed to perfection. I believe we have some unfinished business. The grand foyer buzzed with the low murmur of what was clearly a celebration. Another successful charity gala, no doubt, where the Blackwoods played at philanthropy while stepping on anyone they deemed beneath them. Maya recognized several faces from society pages, all of whom now stared with undisguised curiosity at the unexpected guest. You can't be here, Victoria whispered, her usual commanding presence reduced to something small and desperate. After what you did to our family, to James. What I did? Maya stepped inside uninvited, her security detail flanking her like silent sentinels. Let's be very clear about who did what to whom. James appeared from the crowd, and Maya's heart performed that familiar skip and stop it always did when she saw him. He looked older, wearier, as if the weight of his family's expectations had finally begun to crush him. His eyes found Emma immediately, drinking in details of the daughter he'd never met. Maya. Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer, and an apology rolled into one. I've been trying to reach you. The lawyers said many things. Maya adjusted Emma's blanket with practiced ease, including some very interesting details about your family's financial situation. The color drained from Richard's face. In the months since Maya's exile, she'd learned exactly how leveraged the Blackwood Empire truly was. Old money, as it turned out, sometimes meant old debts, and the Chen Foundation now held a significant portion of those debts. You see, Maya continued, her voice carrying to the assembled guests, who were now unabashedly eavesdropping. I've had time to reflect on the night you threw me out, when you called me trash, when you said my baby would never be good enough for the Blackwood name." Her smile was sharp as winter moonlight. "I wonder what you'll say now that the Blackwood name isn't good enough for her." Victoria's hand flew to her throat, where her signature pearls trembled against her rapid pulse. "What are you talking about?" Maya reached into her purse and withdrew a thick envelope. "Foreclosure notices. Your Fifth Avenue penthouse, the Hampton estate, even this house, all mortgaged to companies that the Chen Foundation acquired last week. You have 30 days. The envelope hit the floor with a soft thud that might as well have been a bomb exploding. Gasps rippled through the crowd as Richard stumbled backward, his face a mask of disbelief. "This is impossible," he breathed. "You're nobody. I'm Emma's mother." Maya cut him off, her voice deadly quiet. "And Emma is the great-granddaughter of Chen Wei-ming. Perhaps you've heard of him? He built hospitals, funded universities, and yes, he also owned the banks that hold your debts." James stepped forward, his eyes never leaving his daughter's face. "Maya, please, whatever you're planning—" "I'm not planning anything, James. I've already done it." She looked around the room at the faces that had once made her feel so small, so unwelcome. "Every charity your family has ever snubbed, every cause you've deemed unworthy, they're all about to receive very generous donations from the Chen Foundation, starting with a new shelter for pregnant women who've been abandoned by their families." The irony hung in the air like expensive perfume turned sour. Victoria found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a croak. "What do you want from us?" Maya looked down at Emma, who was beginning to stir, her tiny features a perfect blend of her parents'. For a moment, the armor of wealth and power slipped, revealing the young woman who had once loved this family, who had believed she could belong here. "I want you to remember this feeling," she said finally. "I want you to remember what it's like to have everything you've built, everything you've counted on, stripped away because someone decided you weren't worthy." She met Victoria's eyes. "I want you to remember that the next time you think about destroying someone's life." Emma's eyes opened then, wide and dark and full of infinite possibility. Maya kissed her daughter's forehead and turned toward the door. "Oh, and James." She paused without looking back. "My lawyers will be in touch about custody arrangements. Emma deserves to know her father, assuming he can prove he's better than the family that raised him."